Hello, and welcome to Wellness Wednesday with 3W. Wellness Wednesday is sponsored by 3W Medical for Women, a nonprofit medical clinic offering free of charge or low-cost women's health services in the Seattle area, regardless of income or insurance status. 3W does not profit off of the health choices women make. The information shared in this podcast is the opinion of the speaker or speakers. Medical information is not intended as individual medical consultation, but for general education only. Always talk to or consult your own health professional for personalized advice regarding medical decisions. And if you're in the Seattle area, consider making an appointment to consult with us. I'm Helen Nguyen, CEO of WAMS/3W Medical for Women, and the host of today's podcast. Hi there, Wellness Wednesday listeners. This is Helen back in the studio. Today's podcast is with someone in your community named Joann Andrews. She is somewhat new to our organization, correct, Joann? Okay. She shared her story with one of our staff members, our advancement director, actually, Juliet Louie. And Juliet came back from just spending time with you and was like, can I ask my friend to come on to our podcast? And I said, absolutely. Because every time we have a guest that comes and share their story, it's always the most listened to podcast because it's full of uniqueness, but also there's a vein that someone picks up that is, oh my gosh, that connects to them. Right. So thank you so much for taking your time to come in today. Your story is of hardship and suffering, but also great joy and goodness that comes out of it. And those are the kind of stories we love, right? So for our listeners, could you share a little bit about yourself? How long have you been in this area? You just took a tour of our clinic. What did you like?
I love how your clinic is set up. I really do. It's you've taken care of everything, made sure that everybody who comes in is comfortable. Yeah. And it's appointed and shows compassion.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. So tell us about you, about yourself.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to share with our listeners about who you are as a person.
Born and raised here in Seattle.
Okay.
Grew up in the Rainier Valley, highest crime rate area of Seattle at that time. Probably might still be, I don't know. My parents are foster parents. I was a foster child up until I was 5 when they were finally granted the ability to adopt. Wow. I adopted myself and 3 other kids. I call it pick of the litter. They actually, they took in 55 foster babies.
Oh my gosh.
And adopted 4.
Wow.
Amazing
55
people.
Yeah. Lives.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mind-blowing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know if Juliet shared with you that I adopted my son.
Oh, no, she didn't.
At 2 days old.
Wow. Awesome.
And my husband and I very much talked extensively about, do we want to foster?
Right.
And it takes a special person to have that calling on their lives to foster.
Yeah. They took in the kids that were unadoptable, and they would have them in their home until they were adoptable. So some kids were there for months, some for years. Just depended on the needs of the child at that time.
Yeah. And how did you end up in the foster system? Do you know, or
I do
can you
know.
Remember?
I do know. Yeah. I have learned a lot lately. My birth mother was raped by her uncle. She found out she was pregnant. A message was sent to him while he was overseas to let him know that she was pregnant. And they had no more contact with him after that. His side of the family knows that he had a child. I learned that through DNA. I did a 23andMe.
Yeah.
And about 8 years after I had done the DNA test, a cousin shows up on my father's side. And they have documentation showing that he had a child, but they didn't know what happened to that child.
Wow.
So that was fascinating to learn. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack
In
just in
that,
those few minutes.
yes.
Because how old was your mom? How old was your birth
She was
mother?
19.
19.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She turned 20 shortly after she got pregnant. So she was 20 when she had me.
Okay. And when was this? What year was this?
61.
61.
Yeah.
Okay. It was a very different time.
Totally different time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She must have been under immense pressure to choose something different.
Back then, the women were sent to an unwed mother's home.
Yeah.
And she was sent to the Lutheran Family and Child Services unwed mother home up in just out of Lake Forest Park.
Okay.
And I had the joy of going there in 84. I was searching, and I went there, and I actually met her social worker at the time, and she remembered her vividly and told me different stories that she had told them.
Yeah.
That her parents owned a greenhouse in Shelton, and they needed help. They needed her care, so as soon as I was born, she needed to go back home. And she loved me dearly. One would love to have kept me, but she wasn't an option.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because that is one of the main things that the caseworker, when I was dropped off at my parents' home, she said that the birth mom wants her to know that she's loved, and that's why she's placing her for adoption.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up just knowing and I grew up in a loving home.
Yeah.
Where we had foster kids coming in and out all the time. And, yeah.
Again, so much to unpack from just that point. Did you get to know anything more about him? And how about her parents, your grandparents? Did they know what was going on?
Only know that he stayed in the military and that he died around 93. That's all I know about him.
Okay.
No other documentation. I've the one cousin that I've met on the 23andMe site. Her father had passed away, and any information he knew was lost that way. And
okay.
An aunt that she contacted said they have no information other than the little bit that they had told me about.
Okay. Okay.
So, yeah.
How do you know anything about how your birth mother was? So she went to this maternity home,
Correct.
unwed mother's home.
Correct.
And did you get any history about how the conversation came up about putting you up for foster care or adoption was the best option at that point? Because you touched briefly that she had to come home and help.
Yes, she had.
Out the family.
Right. She lived with her parents in Shelton. My parents knew that they were somewhere in the area of Washington just because of things that she had talked about.
Okay.
And things that the caseworker had told them. Because they were my foster parents. They could tell my parents a little bit more than a typical adoptive parent. So they knew that she helped with the greenhouse.
Okay.
And that they produced plants for Washington, Oregon area.
Okay.
I've since found out they've produced plants for 7 different states.
Wow.
So they grew pretty good size. Yeah. So I knew my last name was Cook. I knew my father's last name was Kearns. I knew a lot, but because they're such generic names, you know a lot, but you know nothing.
Do you know why you were in the foster care system until 5?
I do. When I was born, something had happened. I don't know exactly what all had happened.
Okay.
They had used forceps, and so they thought maybe they might have done some damage.
Okay.
And so I was 4.5 when they deemed that I was adoptable. And I think, this is my theory,
Yeah.
is because I believe God wanted my parents to adopt me. That's my theory.
Yeah.
And I'll stick with it.
Yeah.
Back then, foster parents, if a child is a viable adoptable child, you didn't get to adopt that baby. You could adopt the ones that were like a brother is CP and another brother who is mentally delayed. My sister and I were able to be adopted at the same time. She's not my birth. She's not blood.
Biological.
But blood is not the key. Love is the key.
It really doesn't matter.
They petitioned the court, received permission to adopt us. And I still remember the day of the adoption. I don't know the date, but I remember the day because we're in the court and my parents had explained that the judge is talking, we have to be quiet. And he says, I want to take the kids back to my chambers. So he brought my two brothers who had already been adopted. So the four of us went back into his chamber. He comes in and takes off his robe and sits down with us and just wanted to ask us questions.
Wow.
And it wasn't scary. It was like, this guy is human. He's not just the great Oz. He's human. He asked us different questions. And in the end, he says, do you want to be sisters and brothers? Do you want to be a family? And of course we said yes. We already were a family.
Yeah.
You know? Why would a 4-year-old or 5-year-old kid say no?
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, I was adopted just before my 5th birthday.
Wow. And you can remember all of that.
I remember that vividly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been, now reflecting back, that must be really special to be able to still hold on to that memory.
Yeah.
Those good memories. Tell me more about your adoptive parents.
Mom was 50, Dad was 55 when I was adopted.
Okay.
But as a kid, I never thought of them as old.
Yeah.
I thought they were young because I turned 50 and I can't do anything near what they could do. My body turned on me.
Oh.
But for them to be able to take care of babies still, they always had. When I was brought in, there were 3 other babies in the house, and plus the 2 kids they had adopted already.
Yeah.
So here's these 4 babies and 2 kids with special needs that are being raised in this home filled with love.
Yeah.
And how they were able to do it.
Wow.
I had 2 kids, and it was too hard. It was hard, but loved them dearly. And so I always thought of them as super young.
Yeah.
You know, now I think back, I'm like, oh my word, they were up there in age.
Seasoned, yeah. And so they adopted you and your younger sister? Does she come after you or before you?
She is 4 months younger than I am.
4 months younger. Yeah. Okay, younger.
So the joke used to be that when I was born early and she decided she needed to stay in the uterus for a while. And now they can actually do that.
Yes,
so, yeah.
So, wow. And so did they adopt the 4 of you?
4 of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they continue fostering after that?
They continued fostering. We had some long-term kids in our home. So there were usually 2 to 3 other kids coming and going here and there. Yeah. Depending on the needs.
Yeah. How did your adoptive parents talk about adoption in the home? What was the word defined as?
It was openly talked about.
Yeah.
Very openly talked about.
Mm-hmm. Did you understand what it meant?
You know, I may not have fully understood, but I knew I was their daughter. Mm. So I guess in many ways, yes, I did understand.
Yeah.
I didn't have to worry about having to be taken away. Yeah. We'd seen some kids come and go as they're adopted, and mom and dad just brokenhearted over it. And I knew that I was forever in their care. Yeah. I could ask any question. Yeah. And whatever they knew, they would tell me.
Do you think that was better than a closed adoption kind of situation? In the sense of adopting now is very different than it was.
It is very
20 years ago, right? Or even 10 years ago in a lot of senses. Yeah, so our adoption situation is, my son's biological mother is very much in our lives and in our picture and in our community. Mm-hmm. I literally just texted her this morning. But I get told from older people than I'm in my late 30s now, but I'm told by folks that are older, that's so weird to them that we keep in contact and you guys talk about adoption very openly in your home. And I've always come with the belief that it's better to have light. It's better to know where you're from, what your story is, instead of trying to hide things or skirt around it. It makes it seem like it's a shameful thing, and it's not.
Because that's what it was like back
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I was born.
Yeah.
The mom was spirited away to
Yes.
a home where she was now had no family contact pretty much until after the baby is born. And it's dictated what she could do and what she can't do, and knew I was adopted. And I think that that is the best way for a parent. Because I have a friend who found out that he was adopted, but he was in his 30s.
Wow.
And it ripped the family apart.
Wow.
It just totally tilted his whole world.
Right.
And I'm like, but they have raised you. They've loved you. But his mind just said, but they kept me in the dark. I always knew there was something missing in my life. I understand that.
Yes.
I do understand that.
Yeah.
Because I've always asked whatever. I looked for information on my parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that I was replacing my mom and dad. So loved by my parents and family. And never wanted to run away. But it's still, there's a connection. Well, actually, last year I received a message from a woman on 23andMe and said, you are listed as a family member. Who are you? Well, usually when I answer that question, I get blocked and not hear another word, or I get a real nasty email. But this time I said, I said, I was given up for adoption at birth. And I've just been wondering about family.
Yeah.
And she says, I know your mom. Wow. And I'm just like, yes, anything you can send me, I would love. Okay. And she literally sent me like a history book of the family going back to the 1800s.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You never connected with your birth mother?
No.
Or knew of her?
No. In 84, I wrote a letter, gave it to the Lutheran family.
Yeah.
Social worker who said that she would forward it.
Yeah.
And I never heard another word. But my naturopath at the time said, Joann, we don't have any history on you.
Yeah.
We need to do 23andMe. At that time, did medical testing too. That's why I went through 23andMe and found out a few things health-wise. And
do you have any connection to your mother's family?
So after getting the packet in the mail about my family, I received an email saying, you have an uncle still alive and he'd like to meet you.
Wow.
I'm like, okay. It's terrifying and exciting all at the same time.
Yeah.
And they were going to be in Shelton last year, but my husband got COVID and I couldn't make the trip on my own. So sorry, I can't come. This year, I received the phone call in July. It's, hi, Joann, my name is Verlinda. I'm your sister. We would like to talk to you. So I call her up, and next thing I know, I'm on a 3-way conversation with my uncle, my brother, and her, my sister. And I'm like, when are you going to be in Shelton?
Yeah.
It's this weekend. We hope we haven't missed that you can come. So I jumped up and down and told my husband, I'm like, we're going to Shelton.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, let's go. And so we took a day off of work and we went there on a Friday and met my brother and sister and uncle. And the next day, they had the family reunion for their side of the family. Mom had passed away a while in 93. No, 95. On her deathbed, she told her children that she'd had a child and given it up for adoption.
Yeah.
And she wanted them to find me. Yeah. And it still brings tears.
Yeah.
Because it's like she was thinking of me on her deathbed.
Yeah. Probably every day.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. And just did not know how to tell her kids.
Yeah.
And they thought, they were told that she had gone through the church. To them, the church was the Catholic Church. And they contacted the Catholic Church. And they said, there's nothing we can tell you. Okay. And I said, of course there's nothing, because she went through the Lutheran family.
Yeah.
But thankfully, their cousin, my mother's cousin, who lived across the street from her, did a DNA test. And miraculously, she went through the same place, 23andMe, that I did.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like a 23andMe blogs thing, but no, it took 8 years before I even had one family member on there.
Right.
A lot of distant cousins, but
Yeah.
nobody who could give me the information I needed.
So these were your half siblings?
Yes. Yeah.
And did you knew what your mother looked like before?
I had no idea what she looked like before.
Okay.
No.
So they were able to show you pictures, I'm sure?
Yes. My mother, birth mother, her gift to her family was doing genealogy books of pictures, putting pictures together and information together.
Okay.
And so there was a picture book for Verlinda and a picture book for Wayne, and there's a picture book for my uncle. And they were able to show me pictures of themselves as small children growing up, and then pictures of my mom.
Wow. How was that, seeing her for the first time?
Just mind-blowing. Yeah.
Did you see any part of yourself in her?
No, but I have a baby picture that's about the same age as my brother Wayne, and we look almost identical.
Really?
Yeah, it's funny.
Wow.
Yeah. And what's even funnier is the jumper I'm wearing is the same jumper that he was wearing at that time. So it's truly, yeah.
Wow.
It
How
funny.
far apart in age?
She married in 1964 and had her first child in 1965. There's a 4-year difference there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did she tell anyone about you before she passed?
They know that there were people who knew about her pregnancy,
Okay.
but it was very close-lipped.
Yeah.
Even after she had told them about having a baby. I'm sure that my cousin, if they would have called her up after her giving them the information on me, she probably would have talked to them about it.
Okay.
But it was so close-lipped that even my uncle had no idea what had happened.
Did her husband know?
I believe yes.
Okay.
I believe yes. I do.
Okay.
I don't think that a person could hide that
Yeah.
from the one you love that much.
Yeah.
Going to commit your life to someone, you're going to
Right.
tell them a secret or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she put anything in writing? No.
No.
Yeah.
No. I wish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about your grandparents? Did they write anything, shared anything, put anything down
Nothing.
that they knew?
Nothing. Nothing that anyone knows of.
Wow. How did you talk about adoption with your own kids?
Oh, with my own children?
Yeah.
Oh, it was always open in regards to ask any question, because we had talked about, my husband and I had talked about doing foster care and maybe adopting. But
Yeah.
due to my husband's life prior to marriage, we couldn't do foster care.
Okay.
So
where are you now? What season are you in now to want to tell your life story and where you are now?
I'll tell anybody.
Yeah.
I'll tell everybody.
Yeah.
Because Adoption, so many people look at it as, I can't do that.
Yes.
And then I know other people who are just crying because they can't get a baby.
Yeah.
They want a baby.
Yeah.
And to be blessed with a child is
Right.
physically can't have a child.
Yep.
And I talk to many women about
Yeah.
be willing to give that child up for adoption.
What would you say to people who, because you shared that your biological mother was raped,
Yeah.
and there's this argument that in cases of rape and incest or horrific sexual violence done on someone,
I'll tell you what
that
I told someone from Greenpeace.
okay.
I was in an English class at Edmonds Community College. A young woman stood up and said, I believe that if I get pregnant by rape, I will not have that baby. And back then I was super shy. Nobody at church knows that. They look at me like, no. But I was so shy.
Yeah.
I stood up and I said, I am a product of rape. My mother was raped by her uncle. By that time I did know that. And I said, but I thank God that she gave me up for adoption. And this young woman immediately started bawling her eyes out, just crying. She says, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said, my mom, I believe my mom, even while she was carrying me, was saying that I love you.
If you could tell her today what your life was like, what would you say?
I, first of all, would just hug her and love her. So glad that she gave me up for adoption.
Yeah.
You know, she knew that she couldn't take care of me at that time.
Yeah.
And I thank her
Yeah.
for loving me enough to give me up for adoption. Because even back then, she could have had an abortion.
Yes.
But she loved me enough to give me up.
Yeah.
And I would just, pretty much what I told my siblings, just hugged them so much.
Yeah.
Just so glad to be able to meet them and get to know who they are. It gives me a glimpse of who my mom was, a loving mom who loved her children, and she would have loved me
Yeah.
if she had kept me.
Yeah. I'm assuming your adoptive parents have passed.
They have, yes. Yeah.
But if you could say anything to them right now, what would you say?
My mom would be ecstatic to know that I met my siblings. She told each of us that when you're ready, you need to look into who your family is.
Yeah. So she encouraged you.
She did.
Wow.
Yeah.
At what age did you start asking?
I asked probably shortly even after I was adopted. I was inquisitive enough about it.
Yeah.
Because I lived with that, with seeing kids who are ripped out of families and brought into the home and loved and cared by them, and see them healing and then go to a family that loves them and where they're able to continue that healing.
Yeah.
I've also seen kids, sadly, that were removed and put back with the parents where it wasn't that great a situation. And my parents were always open to talk.
How many homes were you in before you ended up with your adoptive parents?
0. Just the one.
Wow.
My parents received me when I was 2 days old.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I know.
That's wow.
It's not heard of today.
My son was 2 days old when I picked him up too.
Yes, it is.
Which is a very rare situation. Though.
Right. It
Very
is
rare.
because I was in the home until I was 4.5 before they decided that I was adoptable. There's questions about health or back then using forceps. A lot of kids had cerebral palsy after being born,
Yes.
which is what happened to one of my brothers.
Wow. Are your other adoptive siblings as open to talking about their situation as you and as joyful?
Neither of my brothers know. and neither one wants to know.
Wow.
But my sister hired a PI way back when and found her mother, her birth mom.
Yeah.
And when I told her that I was going to see my siblings, she just started crying and said, I'm going to call my oldest sister up and talk to her. She says, I don't talk to her enough.
Yeah. What would you say to a woman that has an unplanned pregnancy and she is unfortunately not in a position to parent at this moment?
I have had the joy of talking to people since I was in my 20s, talking with people about, I prefer that a person not have an abortion. But if that person sees no other way out, I'll go with you and hold your hand, because I know that anyone who has an abortion, that's a life-altering choice.
Yes. Yeah.
But I want them to know that if they give this child up for adoption, there are so many people who are just crying to have a baby, a child to raise.
Yes.
And these days, with all the medical advancement, et cetera, to carry a child to term, you can still continue working.
Yes.
You can continue to get your college education. It's doable.
Yes.
It is doable. And there are so many agencies who are there to help. And if not, there are churches who are able to help. There are ways to get the help that is needed.
Yeah.
But if they're still stuck,
you'll be there for
I'll
them.
be there for them. Yeah.
You'll be
will.
there. Yeah.
I will. I am one of the people in the church where I have made a few enemies by stating that. I'm not going to go to an abortion clinic with a sign and picket and scream at you for getting an abortion. If I'm there, I'm going to take you by the hand and be with you.
Wow. Yeah. I wish stories like yours, and I think that's why it's so special for us to capture it. I think people need to be more aware of the different types of paths out there of how a life can unfold in great joy, in such goodness. Yeah. Do you hold any resentment or any type of just unforgiveness about how your life has unfolded?
I did for a while.
Okay.
When I learned that my mom was raped by her own uncle, who's 20 years older than her, I was angry.
Yeah.
Very angry.
Rape is a heinous, awful thing.
I don't care how old you are.
Yeah.
It's heinous. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And to do that to your own sister's child.
Right.
Even at the age of 20 or 19, I don't care.
Yes.
You don't manipulate a person like that. You don't do that.
Well, it's just plain evil.
It is. It is. And it took me quite a few years. And I finally, one day, I realized it's eating me up. And I'm not happy. I don't want that anger in me anymore.
Yeah.
And so I sat down with my parents and asked them to pray with me about it in being able to release that anger. It wasn't instant.
Yeah.
No.
It's a journey.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
It was interesting because one day I was at the women's Bible study at our church, and this young woman starts talking about being raped. And I was able to tell her my story, how I was a product of rape. And I found out later that began the journey of healing for her. And I still am in contact with her. She's a mom of 2, and she's a great woman.
What's your message to our listeners, anyone that's listening today, about your story, about what you've learned, about your life? What's a message you want to leave our listeners?
Be open. Be open to hearing what somebody has to say. And be receptive. I've even had people who would sit on my bus until it was empty. I was a bus driver for years. They would sit on my bus until it was empty. And next thing I know, they're pouring out their heart. And we're talking about whatever was bothering them.
Yeah.
That I feel like I can talk to you.
Oh.
So that is my heart right now. Is
Yeah.
if you're hurting in any way, shape, or form, and you don't want to go to a church, you can still say, hey, God, I need help. And He'll provide someone to talk to you. That I believe is so very true.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not an island, right? We need to be in community.
It's a village.
Yeah. We need
It's
to
a village.
be connected to people and their stories and their walks of life and their experiences. There's always something that we could learn and be healed from and be forgiven and be. So many times I think people think that the card they're dealt in their life is just too much, and it consumes them to a point where they feel like it's hopeless, right? And there's no way out of this. But stories like yours, it's stories like your birth mother that we really don't know until we reach out, that there is still a lot of hope in this world.
There really is.
Yeah.
There really is.
Hope and goodness.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
It is it is powerful.
Yeah, you need
powerful.
Kleenexes in you next time.
I do. When it comes to things like this, I'm just like horrible at keeping it together.
Thank you for talking with me.
Yeah.
I just feel it's time for that story to be heard.
Yes.
I've come to a full circle on my story in many ways.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
All right, listeners, if this story has resonated with you in any shape or form, I encourage you to share it with someone in your life that could receive something positive out of this story, out of this message of hope. And that if you're struggling in any way, or if you're in pain, or if you feel like there's no one to talk to, we're here for you. We are here for you. Joann, would you be open to anyone reaching out to you? And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can contact 3W.
Yes, we can
they'll
make that connection.
link together.
Yeah. Absolutely. So thank you so much for listening. As always, please share and follow, download, like our episodes. But this is always such a joy to sit down with someone like Joann, whose story is coming out of the ashes kind of situation. So thank you again.
Welcome.
All right. Thank you, folks. Till next time. For more information about 3W, please visit our website at 3wmedical.org. That's the number 3, the letter W, medical.org. From there, you can learn more information about the services we provide, book an appointment, or make a donation if you'd like to support our mission. You can also call our office at 206-588-0311. That's 206-588-0311. If you like this episode, please share it with others and consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, stay healthy and be well.